Welcome to the NLC Prep History of Surveying playlist. I've always told people, surveyors are like half detective with the 1 foot in history and the other half computer mad scientist with 1 foot in the future. Well, this playlist is all about the past, and I love it. We're going to give you a glimpse into Egypt, Rome, Old England, surveying in Colonial America. It's going to be great. This is my favorite playlist so far. So watch a few videos, and if you enjoy it, hit the thumbs up button, and don't forget to hit subscribe and click that bell. So far, we've talked about ancient history, and we've also talked about sort of near history, the 1800s. But what you don't realize is that currently you are making history right now, which is so cool. But let's jump in and let's talk about 3 different things. We're going to cover 3 things in this lecture. Number 1, where do we come from? Number 2, who are we today? And number 3, where are we going? These 3 questions will not be answered, but the questions will be posed to you, and I will expect you to come up with some good answers for me and see what you think, because perspectives matter. And the more perspectives we get, the better answers we will come up with. John G. McIntyre of Land Survey Systems said, "To understand the present, we must know the past. Surveyors therefore study the past, not to tie themselves to it, but to benefit from the experiences of others." Absolutely. And what you don't realize is that you have much more in common with the surveyors of the past than you realize. Rewind almost, 3,500 years. And there were land surveyors. Now, these land surveyors may not have had an electronic total station or a multi-constellation GNSS, but these land surveyors were just as committed to quality, accuracy, and precision than you are today. And in fact, these land surveyors typically achieved a 1 in 1,500 ratio of precision. Now, that's not quite as good as an EDM, but that's a pretty damn good value. And what that translates into is about 6 inches of error for every 750 feet. Or in other words, what is that? 1 inch of error per every 125 feet of distance. That's amazing. And they needed this stuff because they were building high precision structures. The pharaohs would spend decades of their life constructing a single pyramid as their burial chamber. And if you're going to spend 30 years on one job, it better be correct. Otherwise, the pharaoh's probably going to execute you. Now, Egyptians did not really understand angles quite yet. They worried more about the ratios of distances. Angles come later. But they did lay out lots of square grids in the form of farms. And as you see here, this is the Nile. And the Nile has inundated all of the farms. And the Nile's a freshwater. So it is replenishing all of these farm nutrients so that the farmers can create bountiful crops in the upcoming year. And you guessed it, those land surveyors laid out boundary markers in every one of those square grids, which is awesome. So there were boundary surveyors 4,000 years ago. Not much has changed. Fast forward a little while to the Romans. The Romans were really the first professional land surveyors because Romans loved to build. They were engineers, they were surveyors, and they wanted to colonize the entire world. And the Romans understood that without roads, without structures, without civilization, there would be no colonization. So the Romans created these gromas, and they laid out property, cities, roads, all at right angles. And that's probably where our love for the public land system originated, was with the square grids from Rome. And finally, we've got the Greeks, who developed geometry. Now, without the dioptra, without the idea of the Pythagorean theorem, all of these things, we would have no ability to measure complex angles. So the Greeks also laid a huge foundation for the work of surveyors today. And the Egyptians, the Romans, and the Greeks all combined to make these advanced techniques in surveying, which we still use today. Two of the most famous people in 16th, 17th century and before was William the Conqueror and Napoleon Bonaparte. William the Conqueror was the first person to create a modern GIS. And he made a GIS after he conquered England, and he realized that every English citizen who owned land owed him money. So he decided to create a giant book of property values. Now, we're spoiled today. I love shopping for a new property, so I'm always on the county GIS looking for a good deal, looking for some tax sales, other things going on, and I take that for granted. But William the Conqueror was the first person to think of a single book called the Domesday Book, Domesday, Domesday Book, that held all of the property values for every English landowner. Also, Napoleon Bonaparte. It's true that Napoleon really was a warmonger. He loved going to war and he loved conquering new territory. But one of the other titles of Napoleon was lawgiver. And the lawgiver decided that in order for both a civilian use and a military use, the entire world had to be mapped before it was conquered. So he produced thousands of maps, all the way down from 1 in 25,000 to 1 in 1,250. And these maps were used for a variety of purposes. But Napoleon loved cartography. And they really kind of bridged the gap between ancient civilizations and modern day PLSS surveying. So these two guys are someone you should definitely know about. Another group of famous land surveyors, which you probably don't know about, are the 4 presidents on Mount Rushmore. Now, although there are 4 people here, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, and Theodore Roosevelt, only 3 were surveyors. Why is that? Because 3 of these guys are founding fathers. And, well, 2 of them are founding fathers. Because all 3 of these guys are really some of our first presidents. George Washington, number 1, Thomas Jefferson, Lincoln, and all 3 of these guys were good surveyors. Now, George Washington, the first guy, he was a horrible land speculator. He had the bug. He wanted to buy as much property as he could get his hands on, and he would borrow money to do it. And in fact, George Washington was the first registered county surveyor in America, in Culpeper County. And he was appointed Surveyor General in charge of examination of licensing in Virginia. So George Washington really, he's not only the forefather of America, but he's also the forefather of surveying. Second, Thomas Jefferson, another surveyor, appointed Surveyor General of Albemarle County on October 14, 1773, became the Secretary of State. He even presented the public land survey system to the Continental Congress. And he was chief instigator of the Louisiana Purchase. So Thomas Jefferson was just as much of an unabashed land speculator than George Washington. And finally, Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln became a deputy surveyor in Illinois in 1833, and he did other things. He borrowed textbooks, purchased some old equipment, and hung up his own shingle between 1833 and 1837. And during those 4 years, he performed a ton of farm surveys in rural Illinois. He even laid out several new towns. Bad news. Abraham Lincoln is universally known as a pretty poor surveyor. But that being said, he's our president and he's a surveyor, so we'll take him. Question. What attributes did all of our forefather surveyors have? Number 1, they were educated. Number 2, they were smart, resourceful, and they were also entrepreneurs. They had their own surveying businesses, hung out their own shingle, and did their own work. So I think that we have a lot to learn from our forefather surveyors. And through this process, we can figure out, well, what kind of attributes should I have as a young surveyor trying to make it in this new world? Because if you're smart, if you're resourceful, and if you're an entrepreneur, you want to make money for yourself and grow your business, then those are fantastic qualities even today. Land surveyors are a very unique group of people. We demand a high degree of accuracy and precision, and we love technology. I mean, who doesn't love buying new toys? But we also have to appreciate that the principles we use to survey have existed for hundreds or thousands of years, and applying these principles is what really matters. You know, being able to solve problems. That's why people are paying you. And the ability to solve problems really is done by 3 things. The first hat we wear as a modern surveyor is the historian hat. They say that doctors bury their mistakes, accountants hide their mistakes in rows and numbers, but original surveys live on forever. And because of that, our number 1 mandate is to follow in the footsteps of the original surveyor. Now, sometimes the footsteps disappear with time and often conflict with one another. So that's why surveyors have to have a sharp eye. You know, we got to have a big, darn magnifying glass. But when surveyors stray away from the principles, they often try creating their own surveys as opposed to following the footsteps of the original surveyor. So as good surveyors, we have to keep one eye on the past while also keeping the other eye on the future. Let me ask you, are you a tech wizard? Some people are and some people aren't. But having a good understanding, a working understanding of technology is so important in this business because drones, laser scanning, big data, and other technologies have really combined to create a paradigm shift in the profession of surveying. What once was a toy, fly around with a quadcopter, has now become an ability to collect tens of thousands of points per day. But here's the problem. If you don't use the technology wisely, then you will create data that is garbage. I remember years ago I was working at Woolpert Engineering in the summer, and Woolpert used a series of independent contractors to collect some of their data, totally fine. But the independent contractor kept coming up with all of his points being about 1.35 feet off from the true value. Now, if they were just kind of sloppy, there'd be some points that were off and some points that weren't, but they were dead on. They were always 1.35 feet in error. Well, what the heck is going on? I got put in charge of diagnosing the problem, did some research, more research, and I realized that the GPS technician who was using this RTK unit never properly set up the data file. He just hit next, and he failed to set up the right projection. We were in Georgia. He was using an Alabama projection, so he was collecting the points at the right location. But failing to set up the instrument properly caused all kinds of major problems. Don't be a neophyte, but also don't trust the technology. Use the technology as it was meant to be used, but don't put all your faith in it. The last role surveyors fill today is the quasi-judicial role. Let me start off by saying that surveyors are not judges. Surveyors cannot adjudicate disputes. We cannot decide if there is an encroachment, if there is an overlap, whatever. All we can do is provide the facts. The fact is that Parcel A was made in 1950. Fact is Parcel B was made in 1960. Fact is that a driveway connecting Parcel A is built on Parcel B's property. Report the facts. There will always be inconsistencies or discrepancies in surveys. But thank God there are rules. There's a surveyor's playbook, priority of calls, junior senior rights, the recording statute for deeds. All of these things tell us how to interpret discrepancies. And God help the surveyor who ignores those principles, because the common law gives the surveying community a set of rules to use. Therefore, you should not make up your own rules, otherwise you will be found to be negligent. It is a foregone conclusion that the land surveying profession is shrinking. 2 or 3 years ago, I was providing a lecture in Indiana, CEU lecture. I was the speaker. And I had a guy come up to me at the break, and he said he was scared. And he said he was scared because he has a full head of gray hair. And there are other surveyors in the room all look 20 years older than him because they don't have any hair. So I've got a 60-year-old guy walking up to me and telling me he's scared because all of the other surveyors are older than he is. That is scary. If we don't replenish the ranks of surveyors, there is going to be some serious problems. I did a little digging into the numbers, and I found that in 1990, there were 3,500 Texas land surveyors. In 2005, there were 2,900 land surveyors. And in 2015, there were 2,500 land surveyors registered in Texas. That is a drop of 1,000 land surveyors, or about 30% over just, 25 years. And this is not uncommon. If you look at California, Florida, New York, all of the surveying population is shrinking. Now, there are lots of reasons for this. Stagnating wages, advances in technology, lack of public knowledge of the profession. But the fact is, land surveying right now is shrinking. I'm going to conclude this lecture by providing some ideas about how to grow the profession. And there are 3 ideas I have to grow the profession, and I would like to know your ideas as well. So, number 1, build partnerships. We have got to build partnerships with other surveyors. There may be a Texas society, and there may be a New York society, but all of us in the different states have to work together to recruit the next generation of land surveyors. I'm not sure how that's going to happen, but I know that you've got to have cohesion between the state organizations, the national organization, different universities, and employers. Everybody has to work together to find and fill the pipeline of future surveyors. Number 2, we've got to build legitimacy of land surveying. You know, land surveying has a dearth of book knowledge. If you go and look at the law profession, they have 100 books for every esoteric topic. I mean, they got a book about, how to handle divorces when the couple owns a Yorkie. But land surveyors, we have a single body of knowledge written about 10 years ago. It's pretty decent, by the FIG. We have 1 or 2 legal textbooks. We have 1 or 2 standard textbooks. We have 1 or 2 water boundaries textbooks. We need to have a complete intellectual core which defines land surveying. Now that's tough because land surveying is both technical and professional, a lot of hands-on work, but we've got to have experts producing content. And third, we need to educate other professionals about what we do and why we do it. Today, we've got GIS, UAS, laser scanning, all these cool technologies. And land surveyors basically dropped the ball. We did not take these technologies as our own, but we let other similar professions take over and use them. So we have got to bring in engineers, GIS analysts, real estate agents, lawyers, and show them what land surveyors do. And also to shamelessly promote the quality work we provide. Why should I get a survey? Nobody knows. We've got to educate people about our value. If we can build legitimacy, build partnerships, and educate people on our value, the land surveying profession will grow. As we conclude today's lecture, I would like you to think about how we should grow the land surveying profession, because you are the future of land surveying and y'all will have to make the tough decisions.